Good evening, everyone. Well, as it was in the beginning, God gave us Luke. There he is. Our second son with Down syndrome and lots of heart complications. We were the chosen ones. Now let's fast forward 39 years later and what we have endured during the last 5 months. Beginning in October, Luke kept having falls. And I kept saying, Luke, pick up your feet. Don't be so clumsy. You know, he fell at Many Hands. He works at Many Hands. He fell there. He fell at Pizza Hut. He works at Pizza Hut. Okay, you can't work at Pizza Hut anymore, Luke, because you keep falling. Thanksgiving weekend, we decided to have him come home with us, not knowing what was going to happen next. But we got tired of Thanksgiving food by Sunday, and we decided to take him out for supper. And took his girlfriend, what he calls his girlfriend, Abby. And Luke missed the step, and he accidentally fell on the step. Well, that was a trip to ER because he broke his arm. It wasn't related to any other falls. It was just an accident. But this was a godly intervention. If you hear more of what I've got to say, you'll understand why this was a godly intervention. It was the beginning of a journey to discover why he was falling. He had his first known episode, seizure, the second night after he fell and broke his arm. We rushed him to ER, not knowing what this was that he was doing. And the first thing I thought, it must be his heart, because he's got a pacemaker that's 100% dependent on, his heart is 100% dependent on this pacemaker. So if anything would go bad with the pacemaker, that would be it for him. So that's the first thing they did. They checked, and no, his heart was fine, his pacemaker was fine. So knowing he was having these episodes, we decided to get a security camera and put it on Luke so that I could watch him, because otherwise I was having lots of sleepless nights for the fear that he would have a seizure or an episode. Because every time you had one, I'd shake him. And when I'd shake him, come out of it, he would come out of it. But he would actually go unconscious. He would be totally nothing. He would just go unconscious. So we went to the doctors. Okay, he's having seizures. And I tried to explain and describe what's going on, and they figured out, okay, that must be a seizure. So we're going to put him on some medication, and so we did that, but he kept having seizures. Usually 2 to 3 a day, sometimes 5 a day. Well, on the 18th of December, he goes to work at Many Hands, thinking, okay, he's on medication. He can go to Many Hands now and go back and do his work there. Well, he fell in the morning and hit his head and bumped his head and ended up pretty good bump on his head. And I said, called me, and I went over there and checked, and he's okay. He can stay here. That's fine. Well, that afternoon, he fell and he hit the concrete floor. 911 was called, and they called me, and I couldn't get across town fast enough because there was a train that was 5,000 miles long. And I went around the long way to get to ER because I couldn't get through town because of the train. And I kept thinking, oh, dear Lord, please, please, this is our son. We love him so much. He loves so many people. Help him. And by the time I got there, they were they tried to sedate him and try to get him comfortable. And they just said, he's got a brain bleed. His head started to swell up with blood. And then they decided they wanted to life flight him. And of course, I wanted him to go to Iowa City because that's where he's been all of his life, Iowa City. And nope, we couldn't take him to Iowa City. He's going to go to Omaha Medicine. Omaha, really? I don't know anything about Omaha Medicine, but I guess, okay, go. But you know what? That was also a godly intervention. Because when the flight nurse came from Omaha, and I said, please let the doctors know that this is one special kid. He's loved by so many. Please ask them to do everything they can to help him. So as we're driving to Omaha, I keep thinking, who can I call? What can I do? It's 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. Who can I call? We need prayer warriors. So I went through my phone, and I happened to have Brittany Speaker's phone number in my phone because I work with her because of housing issues. And it just happened to be that she was at the right place at the right time. She was actually our angel that was sent to us to give the message to so many people. And before we knew it, the whole community was praying for us and for Luke. A simple act of kindness. Will he survive? What will we do? People don't survive brain bleeds. We prayed. So we get to Denison, take a break, couldn't find anything open really, but a little gas station, 1 o'clock in the morning or whatever time it was. The neurosurgeon called me on the phone and said, I'm just calling to get permission to do surgery on Lucas. We can save this, we can stop this brain bleed. You can fix it, you can really fix it. Oh yes, we'll get in there and fix that. It'll be okay. Man, did that phone call give us some comfort. We felt God's presence. So we get to Omaha, we're in the parking lot, we're sitting there, because we knew we were there much before Luke would be out of surgery. So we're just sitting there trying to get our bravery, to go into the hospital and face what we were going to have to face. And then all of a sudden at 1:30 in the morning, I get a phone call from California. Who calls me at 1:30 in the morning from California? It must be a scam. I don't think I'll answer it. And then I got this little nudge, yeah, you better answer that phone. And guess what? It was Pastor Ben. He had called us to pray for us and to let us know that he was helping us and everybody else was praying for us. Another verification that God was with us. We walked in the hospital, we met this gal, Pastor Deb, at 1:30 in the morning. I thought, what is this pastor doing here at 1:30 in the morning? She said, we're here to greet you. I'm here to greet you. I want you to know Luke is still in surgery. She told us everything we could. And she said, by the way, I want you to know that your son is in the hands of the top 2 neurosurgeons in the United States. Divine intervention. While waiting in ICU, I remembered Brian from Many Hands had told me that they have security cameras at Many Hands. And he says, I've got pictures of Luke when he fell. And I thought, oh, that might be a really good idea. Could you please send me those? Because we're not trying to figure out why is he having these falls. So he sent me his videos, a simple act of kindness again from Brian. It was a game changer for us. And by looking at the videos, I showed all the neurologists that came in the room with us. They all looked at the videos and they could say, those are atonic seizures. In other words, drop-down seizures, where they just drop because they don't know why, they just drop. And then I kept thinking, how is he going to live with these seizures for the rest of his life? He will not be able to live alone again. He'll probably always have to live with us. So then he gets into ICU. We go up there in ICU. And once we got out of ICU, then Lee was able to go home and go back and do his work and do what he had to do, take care of the dog. So the minute he got out of sedation, they put the EEGs on your head where they measure the brain waves, waiting for a seizure to happen. So he laid in the hospital for 6 days. During that entire time, he had not one seizure. And it was probably because he was sedated yet from the surgery. Well, it was time to go home. And they wanted Luke to get up and start walking and get moving, and not understanding what was happening to him. He was being stubborn. He didn't want to eat. He didn't want to walk. And then the social worker came in and said, Luke, your son's going to have to go to a nursing home. I cried. I broke down and I said, this kid is not going to a nursing home. He is going to cooperate. He will do OT. He will do PT. And I got really mad at Luke, and I said, you know what, I'm going home. I grabbed my bag, and I walked out the room. I said, you're going to stay here alone, and you will go to a nursing home. He cried and got upset and said, Mom, come back here, come back here. So I went back in, we prayed, we hugged, and guess what? He walked and he ate. So finally, Christmas Day, we got to go home. And they increased his meds, they changed his meds. He was walking, going to therapy, and we thought, okay, we're good. He should be good to go. They changed his medication, he should be good to go. Well, we took him back to Many Hands to go back to work. And of course, he was wearing the helmet at that time, because we had to wear the helmet all the time. And he fell again at Many Hands. And I want you to know, if you want to find love in action, just go to Many Hands. Those guys, Carmen, Brian, and Doug, they are like family to Luke, and they help him and with him so much, and they accepted him all the time, no matter what. So, but it got to be where he was falling quite often and having these seizures quite often. They said, we better not have him come to Many Hands for a while until we get this straightened out. Then on February 3rd, Lee decided to have a heart attack. He didn't decide, it just happened, right? So he was life-flighted. And here I had to leave Luke at home because I had to go and be with Lee. And Luke was scared, and he called us 5-6 times while I'm in the ER with Lee, tried to figure out what they're going to do. And so they went ahead and decided we're going to life flight him to Omaha, or Sioux Falls. He was going to Sioux Falls. And I thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? I've got Luke to take care of, and now Lee, this has happened to me. How am I going to do this? And then I just remember, fear not, I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I'm your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand. And you know, God has been there for us since the day Luke was born. So I had faith in him that this was going to get through this. Well, the next morning I called to check and see how Luke said. And you haven't heard the update, have you? I said, no, I haven't. Lee coded on us. We had 3 attempts of CPR and 2 paddles before you could get him back. He died for actually 5 minutes. And it just ran through it was a terrible day. I thought, how can anybody, I've known couples that have lost their spouses, but I lost mine for 5 minutes, and things just kept coming in my head. It was the worst day that I had. But you know what? God decided he was not done with them yet. And no, Lee will tell you, he did not see the pearly gates. Anyway, we got back. So on February 10th, I have Lucas at the house, and Lee's still in Sioux Falls. And Luke falls at the house and breaks his jaw. And I had a heck of a time getting him off the floor because it was just me and him. And I don't know how I got the strength. God gave me the strength. But we pulled him up, and we were able to get him up. I was able to get him up. So we went to Sioux Falls, and then he had surgery, and he had his mouth bandaged shut, and he had a broken jaw. So we dealt with that for another week or 2. And then on the 17th, Lucas had 8 seizures in 24 hours. And when you have that many seizures, it's serious. It's nothing you want to mess around with. Took him to the hospital, and Dr. Rogers at the Spencer Hospital, praise God for him, all blessings flow, because Dr. Rogers is an absolute wonderful doctor. He said, this boy of yours is critical. He's unstable. We need to get him to Omaha. So back to Omaha we go. And Lee was still recuperating from a heart attack. So I followed the ambulance to Omaha myself. And, I got to back up. I forgot that Lee was supposed to get home from the hospital. I mean, this thing with Lee was kind of a blur because I was so much with the Luke. But the day that Luke fell and broke his jaw, this was the same day that Lee was supposed to come home and be home from the hospital. And I thought, well, how am I going to do that? I can't go 2 opposite directions one day. So Lee worked with the social worker at a Vera clinic, and they decided to give Lee a ride home while I drove Luke to Sioux Falls to have the jaw surgery. Another simple act of kindness. But anyway, on with the seizures, lots of seizures. They put him in the neurology unit thinking it was brain. He hooked up the EEGs again. You got to stay in bed for 4 days. And of course, during that time for 4 days, no seizures, but he did develop blood clots. He ended up with blood clots in his legs. But we were going to go home because he got more medicine, and it was time to go home, and he can go home on a blood thinner. So all of a sudden, he started having seizures. And so I didn't dare leave his side. I always had to stay with Luke, because if he had a seizure, they wouldn't, they don't shake him and wake him, get him out of it or something. So I felt like I always had to stay there. Well, a classmate of mine came up lives in Omaha, And she said, Nancy, you need a break. Why don't you go downstairs and I'll stay here with Luke for a while. And on my way back, the lights were flashing. Everybody was in the hospital room, nurses, cardiologists, pacemaker people, neurologists. Luke had had another seizure and his heart rate dropped to 0, clinically dead. So they hurry up and transferred him to the cardio unit. The cardiologist ordered an x-ray, and it was then that they discovered the pacemaker lead to his heart had a short in it, and that was causing cardiovascular seizures. Basically, the heart rate drops down to 0. You have no blood and no oxygen to the brain, and then you go into this seizure because of lack of blood and oxygen to the brain. His EEG shows a flat line. Luke's heart is 100% dependent on this pacemaker. So the emergency surgery put in the new lead. It was emergency surgery at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They put the new lead in his pacemaker to his heart. And that's when I say, when God, all things are possible. Because that surgeon, I asked the cardiologist, I said, have you ever seen anything like this happen? No, he had never seen anything like this happen. Who would have ever guessed it was his heart? We've been treating his brain. So finally, on February 28th, we get to go home. 62 deathly cardio seizures and 18 falls later. He now has to wear the helmet for 2 more months, just to be sure that, on the safe side, that it is just the cardio seizures and not the head. But this is a good opportunity for me to thank everyone. And we have been so blessed with the meal trains. What a great idea for the meal trains. If anybody doesn't know what that was, we had meals picked up and we were able to take them home. I was cooking soft diet, liquid diet, and cooking meals for us. So the meal train was a blessing. And people have been so generous with gas cards. We've made I don't know how many trips to Omaha and Sioux Falls. Donations, greeting cards, phone calls, visitors. The last 6 months, we have really witnessed miracles from Jesus through the Word, through the power of God. Miracles that continue to help us grow in our faith and know the presence of God. It is the power of God that Lee and Luke are still with us today. People say, Nancy, how do you do it? Well, in the mix of all this, I also care for my aging mother, my uncle who just passed away last week, and my work through Elder Bridge on aging, advocating for over 40 clients that need my help too. So how do I do it? I just do it. I get my strength and courage from the love of Jesus. So I want to thank you all for your love and support, for your simple acts of kindness. And we praise God for all blessings flow.